Winners are
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching America 360 on News X World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. US President Donald Trump has said that the proposal for Ukraine peace deal has been fine-tuned with collaboration of both Russia and Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin tells reporters that he believes the United States understands the complexity of reaching a peace settlement in Ukraine. Kremlin's top foreign policy aide, Yuri Ushakov, confirms there is a preliminary agreement for US President Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, to visit Moscow next week. He is likely to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Trump administration threatens to recall Senator Mark Kelly to active Navy duty and prosecute him for urging troops to disobey illegal orders, while the FBI and the Pentagon launch investigations. Brazil's Supreme Court orders former President Jair Bolsonaro to begin a 27-year-old prison sentence for plotting a coup after losing the 2022 election. He is now detained in Brasilia. At least 13 people have been killed in a major fire that has engulfed a residential building in Hong Kong's northern Taipei district. Several people are still trapped inside the building. Israel confirms the identity of the hostage body returned by Hamas on Tuesday. The hostage has been identified as Dror Or. With the latest handover of Or's, it remains at least 2 more hostages still held in the territory. Israel's defense minister Katz vows there will be no calm in Lebanon until Israel's security is guaranteed. Katz also emphasizes that Hezbollah must fully disarm. And viewers, Russia has reiterated its commitment to nuclear arms control, with Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov, saying that Moscow's proposals on the New START treaty are aimed at preventing negative global scenarios. President Vladimir Putin has offered to voluntarily maintain the limits on the United States and Russia's nuclear arsenals set under the 2010 Accords, which is due to expire in February, on the condition that Washington does the same. Ryabkov has also stated that despite signals from the United States about improving ties with Russia, Ukraine continues to receive American-made weapons and intelligence support. Listen in to what he had to say first.
Взаимоотношения наши с США все еще находятся на ранних стадиях процесса нормализации, и общий успех данного процесса не гарантирован. В совокупности можно сказать, что завершение жизненного цикла ДСНВ предрешено, и это произойдет в феврале 2026 года в полном соответствии с заложенными в соглашении временными рамками.
And Raymond Vickery, who is an international affairs expert and former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce, joins us live from Washington, D.C. I extend you a very warm welcome and thank you for joining us here at News X World. Now, Russia is maintaining that the normalization of ties between U.S. and Russia are still in a very nascent stage. Now, apart from the sanctions threats that is looming large, what are the other sticking points, if you could explain that to our viewers?
Thanks very much for having me. Waging peace, like waging war, requires a strategy and it requires partners. At this point, unfortunately, the Trump administration does not have an overall strategy in dealing with Russia, nor has it had a partnership with other great democracies like India, like those in Western Europe and Japan. Instead, the approach has been a sort of real estate development, one-on-one, making a deal, and then having that transaction show our president as having won. This is completely inadequate in regard to what is a very, very important structural problem for the relationship between the United States and Russia. Ukraine has to be resolved. It's really impossible to make progress on other points in regard to security and trade without resolving what has been the worst transgression of the principles of the UN Charter, which has occurred since World War II. And so that resolution must take place. And at this point, the negotiation has been largely between Ukraine and U.S. And not with Russia. Now, Mr. Ambassador Witkoff is going to go to Russia. But if you look at the reality on the ground, as President Macron has said from France, the reality is that the Russians have rejected the proposals with fire and bombing as opposed to any kind of amelioration or stepping back from hostilities. So this is a very difficult situation. The Russians say it's very, very complex. It's not really so complex. What's required is for Russia to live up to the 1994 Budapest Agreement, in which they guaranteed the independence and security of Ukraine in return for Ukraine giving up its nuclear weapons. So I'm not sure that we have made progress because we have neither the strategy nor the partnerships necessary to bring pressure on Putin and Russia to resolve the matter.
All right. So I will bring that Ukraine question later on into the discussion. But for now, I want to bring in the New START treaty. Now, with the US-Russia nuclear treaty set to expire in February next year, what's the future likely to be?
Well, this is, of course, the existential question. All of the good which has been done in the past 80 years could be undone in an afternoon if there were to be an exchange of nuclear weapons. So this is really the crucial matter. And once again, President Trump seems to want to come out as some sort of personal winner in this, threatening to resume, in fact, ordering resumption of nuclear testing. I believe that there is enough sanity on both sides in regard to Russia and the United States to realize that this is not the way forward. President Trump follows the art of the deal, taking an extreme position in hopes that the other side will fold and that he will somehow come out in a triumphant position. This question of nuclear armaments and a moratorium on testing is not a matter for individual triumphant posturing. What it needs is extension of the kind of agreements which you've had with START and others since World War II, I believe that in spite of what's going on in Ukraine, that we will be able to at least have an extension of the status quo. If not, that's a very, very serious situation. And I would say that other nuclear powers, such as India, need to step forward and put pressure on both of these parties to prevent the nuclear disaster which would occur from further testing, much less a war.
Well, absolutely. Requested to stay on, Mr. Vickery, as we want to give our viewers some more information on Witkov's likely visit to Moscow. Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin, who was speaking during a state visit to Kyrgyzstan on Wednesday, said he believes that the United States understands the complexities involved in reaching a peace settlement in Ukraine. Now, this comes ahead of U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkov's planned visit to Moscow next week, where he and other senior U.S. officials will discuss a possible peace plan with Russian officials. Now, the plan that's backed by U.S. President Donald Trump has sparked concerns in Ukraine and Europe, as it appears to heavily favor Russian demands, including limiting Ukraine's NATO ambitions and enshrining Moscow's control over a large portion of Ukrainian territory. Despite the concerns, Ukrainian President Zelensky has expressed willingness to advance the peace framework and discuss it further with Trump, including involving European allies in the talks. However, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov warned that the peace process remains delicate and uncertain. First, listen in to what President Putin had to say.
А я с удовольствием проинформирую вас о том, что у нас происходит на направлении достижений приемлемых для нас результатов, искомых для нас результатов мирными средствами на украинском направлении. Я знаю, что вы всегда в курсе, вас всегда это тоже беспокоит, и вы тоже один из тех людей, которые стремится к тому, чтобы этот.
All right, let's bring back Mr. Vickery into the discussions here. Mr. Vickery, first of all, thank you for staying on with us. And now, what impact or what's the likely outcome that we can expect from the U.S. ambassador's visit to Moscow next week, especially given the fact that we do know that back-channel talks were held in Abu Dhabi just a few days ago?
Well, one wishes Ambassador Witkov well. It is, of course, much better to talk than to be involved in the kind of violence which has taken the lives of so many people on both sides. That having been said, it does not seem to me that it is likely that Putin is going to change his mindset. And his mindset is a throwback to the era of empire. He has said many times that he thinks that the worst geopolitical disaster of all times was the demise of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was nothing in geopolitical terms but a communist takeover of the Russian Empire. And so what he has in mind is that Russian greatness and his greatness is determined by whether or not he can establish the empire. Unfortunately, Russian troops have made very, very small advances in Ukraine during 2025. This has encouraged him in his belief that this empire building can go forward on his terms. So the likelihood that he is going to fold and say to Witkov, yes, we accept the slimmed down 28-point proposal, which now does not give the concessions of territory, nor does it give the kind of guarantees against NATO being a protector of Ukraine. The chances that this is going to work are very, very slim. As I say, all peace-loving people must encourage this and hope that it works. And one hopes that the President of the United States will understand that he has to bring in a legitimate and respectful way other great democracies like India, like in Western Europe, like in Japan, to provide the kind of coalition that will see that Moscow's interest in the long run are in peace and prosperity rather than empire building.
All right. Mr. Vikri, one last question to you before I let you go. Now, how is Ukraine to see Putin's statement that Trump does understand the complexity of the Ukraine war, and especially with the Witkov's visit, will Ukraine really be left in muddy waters?
Well, you know, this statement that President Trump understands the complexity simply, it seems to me, is a reference to the fact that he's willing to give up portions of Ukrainian territory, that he is willing to make concessions in order to placate a person and a nation which really have been his friends in the past. One would hope that he would not fall victim to this view of supposed complexity, but get back to basics. And the basics are the values enshrined in the United Nations Charter against invasion of your neighbors, and respect for independence of sovereign nations. That's the basic principle. This whole situation was not brought about by complexity. It was brought about by invasion and territorial aggrandizement. And so, yes, Trump understands real estate kinds of transactions in which you get something and you give up very little, and therefore you have won. But that's not the kind of understanding which is going to further this peace process.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Vikri, for giving us your time here at NewsX World, and we appreciate you sharing your perspectives. And with that, viewers, let's move on to another important development coming from the United States. Now, threats by the Trump administration to recall Senator Mark Kelly to active Navy duty and prosecute him under military law for advocating troops disobey illegal orders would encounter major hurdles due to strong troop due process rights. Now, Kelly and 5 other Democratic lawmakers with military or intelligence backgrounds released videos encouraging troops to disobey illegal orders, which Trump called dangerous and seditious. The FBI and the Department of Defense are investigating. Democrats have criticized the Trump's decision to target boats allegedly carrying drugs from Latin America and to deploy the National Guard to police U.S. cities. Now, in the video, Kelly told service members that Democrats' laws are clear and they can refuse illegal orders. And David K. Johnston, who's an American author, joins us live from New York. Thank you for joining us here at NewsX World. A very warm welcome to you. Now, I just want to understand from you, how is military law going to pose hurdles in the investigation against Kelly and other Democrat lawmakers?
Well, the law itself is actually the best friend that Mark Kelly has. Yesterday, my law class spent the whole hour going over this case. What Mark Kelly and the other Democrats said was that you may, can, or should refuse to follow illegal orders. Officers of the U.S. military are under an obligation not to follow illegal orders. There is no crime in that. The plan here by Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, is to reactivate the retired Captain Mark Kelly. He's 61 years old, and we can reactivate officers until they're 70 years old, and then court-martial him for sedition. Sedition under American law requires the proposed use of force against the United States. That's not at all what was being discussed here. But there's a significant risk in that Hegseth and cooperative general officers could stock the jury that will try Mark Kelly, if it gets to trial, with people who will, in fact, follow an illegal order to find Mark Kelly has done something illegal when he has not. That's the principal risk faced by Mark Kelly, who, by the way, is a decorated combat veteran. He flew 39 combat missions in the Gulf War 34 years ago. He's landed a jet fighter on an aircraft carrier almost 400 times.
All right. Now, I would also like you to explain to our viewers as to how is this confrontation between Trump and Mark Kelly going to have an impact on US's defense and military?
Well, I think many of the things the Trump administration is doing are damaging our military. Trump and his team have fired some of the most knowledgeable, most respected people, both in intelligence and in military strategy. They've been removing people in what seems to be a quite clear pattern of, if you're not a white male and nominally a Christian, you have a target on your back. In addition, there's another element here, and that is Kelly may be well catapulted into the White House by this. This may backfire on the Trump's team tremendously. Kelly is someone who would have all the historic credentials to get elected to the presidency should he want to run in 2028, and assuming we have elections in 2028 and have not become a full-blown dictatorship, not just the nascent dictatorship that we are right now.
Could you also help us understand what is it that's prompting Kelly and others to call these orders illegal? And how is the martial law really going to favor him and, put hurdles to Trump's case?
Well, Donald Trump has repeatedly ordered the United States Navy to attack and sink boats near Venezuela and Colombia, in the Pacific Ocean in the case of Colombia, that the White House says with no proof are drug boats. Under international law, the president has no authority to do this. Under American law, he has no authority to do this. And I'm not the only person pointing this out as a law professor. It's been pointed out by numerous retired military lawyers. It is, in the words of one of the former chief JAGs of the U.S. Navy, murder, plain and simple. And we know that at least 2 of the boats that were sunk, there are more than 80 people who've been killed, were fishermen who were out at night. And one of the Trump people, in fact, said, well, why would you be out fishing at night in the Caribbean? Oh, I don't know, because fish in the Caribbean go where it's dark during the daytime so predators don't eat them, and they go to the surface at night to feed. That's why. So what you're seeing here is an outrageous abuse of power and law. And were it not for a 2023 U.S. Supreme Court decision that former presidents may not be prosecuted for official acts, you would see, when Donald Trump leaves office, his indictment for murder.
All right, very strong remarks by you there, but I thank you for joining us here at NewsX World and giving your opinion. With that, viewers, let's move on. There's some news coming in from Brazil, where Supreme Court has orders former President Jair Bolsonaro to begin serving a 27-year, 3-month prison sentence for plotting a coup after the 2022 election. Now, Justice Alexander de Moraes rules that the court has reached its final judgment with no further appeals possible. Bolsonaro, who is 70 years old, has led a conspiracy to stay in power, including plans to arrest and execute Justice Moraes and to target President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva and his running mate. The plot failed as military commanders refused to back him. Bolsonaro admitted attempting to tamper with his ankle monitor, blaming medicine-induced paranoia. Now, the court maintains and mandates full-time medical care during his detention in a federal jail in Brasilia. The Supreme Court also orders co-conspirators, including former ministers and military officials, to begin serving their sentences. Bolsonaro is barred from running for office until 2060, 8 years after his sentence ends. With that, let's move on. Now, Robert Deere, who was charged with killing 3 people and wounding 9 others in a 2015 shooting spree at a Colorado abortion clinic, has died in a prison medical center. According to the Federal Bureau of Prisons, courts had repeatedly deemed Robert Deere mentally unfit to stand trial. Deere has now reportedly died at the U.S. Medical Center for Federal Prisoners in Springfield, Missouri. He was in custody since his arrest immediately after the rampage on November 27 in 2015. State and federal prosecutors had sought for a decade to convict him for the attack on the Planned Parenthood clinic. Robert Deere admitted to the mass shooting in several state court hearings, including when he proclaimed himself a warrior for the babies, a reference to his anti-abortion beliefs. Federal prosecutors said Deere traveled to the clinic with a dozen firearms, propane tanks, and more than 500 rounds of ammunition. In 2016, the state court judge ruled him incompetent to stand for trial after the 2 state court appointed psychologists diagnosed him with a paranoid delusional disorder that they said rendered him mentally unfit. Authorities tried to restore Deere's mental fitness while he remained in custody. As recently as June 2024, a federal appeals court ruled he could be given antipsychotic medications against his will in hopes of establishing competency for trial. However, the defense experts said the drugs were unlikely to work, citing Deere's age and long duration of untreated psychosis. And that's a wrap on America 360, but do keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from across the world.
Thank you.